Hi everybody, welcome to our seventh class, second asynchronous class. Today we're going to talk about code word secret languages, especially as they are relevant to the LGBTQ plus community. I'll explain what that means. If you don't know, I'm going to introduce Gertrude Stein and her particular modernist style. And we're going to talk about a number of important words in the story Miss Furr and Miss Skeene. So, part one, we're going to talk about secret languages. So we're still in the unit about specifically language use, and we saw that one solution for the issue of using English as your language, even though it wasn't, even though you're not part of the general mainstream culture, was to use a different language. Use words from Spanish, from Arabic, from Bengali, draw from that. You can't, but of course, you can't always do that. Some communities have lost their language violently, like African American and some Native American community just lost every touch with their original language. Even in the second, third generation to immigration, a lot of people lose the connection to their original language. A lot of Jewish Americans only know a few words in Yiddish or Russian. A lot of third generation Asian Americans won't know Chinese or Korean or any Indian language. So what do you do? So how do you create your own language when you don't have access to a whole other language? How do you create a pocket for yourself? That's the question. Of course, a community like disabled people or gay people who never had a specific other language, they don't have any access to words in other languages that belong specifically to their group. So what I'm going to suggest here is that they create new languages or give different alternative subcultural, you could call it, meanings to words that exist in the English language and create this kind of minor languages within the major languages. Okay, so these codes words, that's not really an official term like irony. It's something I present to you. So what I mean here is words and phrases that only people from the certain minority or subculture that is can understand. By subculture, I don't mean something that's less important or less good, but just a section of the culture that only a minority of people have access to. One of the examples of a subculture can be hippie culture or punk culture or hip hop culture, or often these are for young people that are not necessarily from a minority group, but the gay community, lesbian cultures, definitely an example of a subculture. Again, not judging it as something that's less important than the general culture, but just smaller than the general culture. Okay, so LGBTQ plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, and other identities that are on this spectrum, and these communities often have a slightly different language than the general community. in which they use to communicate with one another. Often this is because they don't want to be understood. In the past, and in some places still, and for some people still, being gay, being with people of your own sex was considered, and still is considered, a crime. So, and even if it wasn't considered a crime, it was unacceptable. So you had to communicate in a way that the straight society, that's another such word, wouldn't understand. So, for instance, something that's out of fashion, a gay man could be called a friend of Dorothy's. Really, if you don't know what that means, you say, I know I don't know Dorothy. But if you do know what it means, yes, I am, and you can find a partner, a friend. But some of these are not just codes really to get around straight society. Some of them are more like slang, like to throw shade is to insult somebody. Now I know this because these are old terms that sit into general society, but I'm sure that there are words that gay people use today that I never heard about because they belong to that subculture. And the word, and I'll talk about how the word gay itself was part of that subculture before it became such a common word to describe homosexuals. Okay, so you might say that this is a little similar to what we discussed last week with irony. Well, right? Both are kind of doubling of meaning. You say one thing and you mean something else. You say a friend of Dorothy, but you actually mean gay. You say shade, like to throw shade, but you mean to insult. So in that sense, it is similar to irony, and that's why both of them are relevant very relevant to the issue of minor literature. But the difference is that irony is situational. At one moment, you're saying, you're such a good cook, honestly, sincerely, and in one other instance, you can say the exact same words, but because of the way you say them, the context of a bad meal, and then it's ironic. This language that I'm talking about is more stable. At one point in history, for a specific group, saying queen means gay, okay? Or saying throwing shade doesn't mean that you're going to put a sunshade above somebody. It means to insult. It's more stable than irony. Before you get back to me, watch the short biographical video about Gertrude Stein.